She believed love wasn't for her kind. The human proved her wrong asterisk. The crash that changed everything when two worlds collide. The mining colony of Kepler 442b was the kind of place where broken dreams went to die. Jake Morrison had been there for 3 years, running equipment repairs for the titanium extraction operation. He kept to himself, worked hard, and tried not to think about the life he'd left behind on Earth. The endless gray skies and rocky terrain suited his mood perfectly. That changed the day something fell from those gray skies. Jake was checking the atmospheric processors when he heard the sonic boom. A streak of silver cut through the clouds, trailing smoke and fire. The impact shook the ground beneath his feet, sending shockwaves through the mining complex. Emergency alarms blared as workers scrambled for cover. What the hell was that? Someone shouted over the chaos. Jake grabbed his toolkit and headed toward the crash site. Company protocol said to wait for the emergency team, but something told him whoever was in that ship might not have time to wait. The wreckage was scattered across half a mile of rocky terrain. At the center sat a pod-like craft, its hull cracked, and bleeding strange blue fluid. The stranger from the stars. Steam hissed from the damaged vessel as Jake approached. Through a shattered viewport, he could see movement inside. Someone was alive in there. He found an emergency release and pulled. Hard. The hatch groaned open, revealing the most extraordinary being he'd ever seen. She was tall, nearly 7 feet, with skin that shimmered between deep purple and silver. Her hair was white as starlight, and even unconscious, there was a regal quality to her features. But what struck Jake most were the tears frozen on her cheeks. Even aliens cried, it seemed. "Hey, can you hear me?" Jake called softly, climbing into the cramped cockpit. She stirred at his voice, and when her eyes opened, they were the color of liquid gold. Fear flashed across her face as she tried to scramble away from him. "Please," she whispered in accented English, "do not take me back to them." Jake raised his hands peacefully. "Easy there. I'm not taking you anywhere you don't want to go. My name's Jake. You're hurt." She studied his face, searching for deception. Finding none, she relaxed slightly. "I am Zephyra," she said, wincing as she tried to move. "Zephyra Vel Terran of the Altarian Collective." "Well, Zephyra, looks like you've had a rough day. Let me help you." Healing wounds, building trust. Jake's quarters weren't much, but they were private and warm. He'd helped Zephyra inside before the emergency teams arrived, claiming he'd found nothing but wreckage. She was too valuable to hand over to corporate bureaucrats who would see her as either a threat or a commodity. Over the next few days, he learned her story. Zephyra was a researcher, a brilliant scientist who had discovered something her government wanted buried. When she refused to destroy her work, they branded her a traitor. The arranged marriage to a brutal military commander was meant to be her punishment and their control over her. "In my culture," she explained one evening as Jake bandaged a cut on her arm, "females like me are considered defective. Too tall, too independent, too intelligent. We are given to males who can break. Use properly." Jake's jaw tightened. "That's not culture. That's cruelty." Zephyra looked surprised by his anger on her behalf. "You do not understand. Among my people, I am considered unmarriageable. My height, my ... proportions ... they are seen as flaws." "Then, your people are idiots," Jake said bluntly. "You're the most beautiful person I've ever met." The golden eyes widened in shock. No one had ever called her beautiful before. The first spark as Zephyra healed, something else began to grow between them. Jake found himself looking forward to their conversations, to the way her face lit up when she talked about her research. She was fascinated by human culture, by their concepts of individual choice and personal freedom. On Altaris, everything is decided by genetic compatibility and social status, she told him. Love marriages are considered primitive, emotional weakness. Maybe that's why they're so miserable, Jake suggested, making her laugh. It was the first time he'd heard that sound, like silver bells in a gentle breeze. One night, as they sat, watching the twin moons rise over the mining colony, Zephyra turned to him with tears in her golden eyes. "Why are you helping me, Jake Morrison? What do you gain from harboring a fugitive?" Jake met her gaze steadily. "Maybe I'm tired of being alone. Maybe I think everyone deserves a chance at happiness, even tall, beautiful aliens who think they're unmarriageable." For the first time in her life, Zephyra felt something she'd never dared to hope for. The feeling humans called love.hearts, across the stars learning to trust days, melted into weeks as Zephyra grew stronger. Jake had rigged a communication blocker around his quarters, making them invisible to scanning equipment. To the outside world, he was just another lonely miner, but inside his small home, two hearts from different worlds were learning to beat in rhythm. Zephyra marveled at Jake's gentleness. Altarian males were taught that strength meant dominance, that love was conquest. But Jake treated her like something precious, not something to be broken. When she flinched at sudden movements, he moved slower. When she struggled with human customs, he explained patiently. "Where I come from," she told him one morning as they shared breakfast, "showing emotion is considered weakness, especially for females in positions of authority." Jake watched her carefully measure her words, her posture. Even here, safe with him, she held herself like a soldier. "What happens if you show weakness?" "Punishment, reconditioning, sometimes ... removal." Her voice grew quiet. "I had a sister once. She fell in love with a lower caste male. When they discovered her, she was sent for genetic restructuring. She came back ... different. Empty." Jake reached across the small table and took her hand. Her fingers were long and elegant, twice the size of his own, but they trembled at his touch. "I'm sorry. That should never happen to anyone." Small gestures, big changes. Jake began leaving small gifts for Zephyra. A flower from the hydroponic gardens, a book of human poetry downloaded from the colony's database, a music player with songs from Earth. Each gesture amazed her more than the last. "Why do you do these things?" she asked, holding a small crystal he'd found in the mines. It caught the light and threw rainbow patterns on the walls. "Because you smile when I do," Jake said simply. "And because no one should go through life without knowing they're valued." That night, Zephyra made a decision that went against everything she'd been taught. She told Jake about her research, the discovery that had made her an enemy of the state. She had found evidence that Altarian society was built on lies, that their rigid caste system was artificially maintained through genetic manipulation and propaganda. "Your people deserve to know the truth," Jake said after she finished explaining. "The truth would destroy everything they believe in. Sometimes things need to be destroyed before they can be rebuilt better." The first kiss had happened during a power outage that left the colony in darkness. Jake was adjusting the backup generator when Zephyra appeared beside him, her night vision far better than his. In the dim emergency lighting, she looked ethereal, otherworldly. "I have been thinking about what you said," she whispered. "About rebuilding." "Yeah? On Alterus, we have a saying, 'The heart that beats alone dies in silence.' I thought it meant we needed our collective, our society. But perhaps—" She moved closer, her golden eyes reflecting the emergency lights. "Perhaps it means we need connection. Real connection." Jake's breath caught as she reached up to touch his face. Her hand was warm against his cheek. "Zephyra, I have never felt what humans call love," she continued, her voice barely audible. "But if this feeling in my chest, this warmth when I see you, this fear of losing you, if this is love, and I understand why your species values it so highly. There. First kiss was tentative, careful. She was so much taller that Jake had to reach up, and she had to bend down, but somehow they fit together perfectly. When they broke apart, both were trembling. I never thought I could feel this way about anyone, Jake whispered. Nor I my people. Would say this is impossible, that genetic compatibility cannot exist between our species. Jake smiled in the darkness. Your people say a lot of things that turn out to be wrong. Growing closer as the weeks passed, their relationship deepened. They talked for hours about their different worlds, their hopes and fears. Jake told her about Earth, about blue skies and oceans, about families that stayed together by choice rather than genetic decree. Zephyra shared stories of Alterus before the collective took over, when her people had been explorers and artists instead of conquerors. They began sleeping in the same bed, not for passion, but for comfort. Zephyra had nightmares about being dragged back to her homeworld. Jake dreamed of corporate security teams breaking down his door. But in each other's arms, they found peace. One morning, Zephyra woke to find Jake watching her sleep. What is it? She asked, stretching her long limbs. I was just thinking how lucky I am, he said, brushing a strand of silver hair from her face. A year ago, I was just existing, going through the motions. Now I have something worth living for. Zephyra pulled him closer, her heart swelling with emotions she was still learning to name. For the first time in her life, she felt complete. But she also knew their time was borrowed. Sooner or later, someone would come looking for her. And when they did, everything would change. Asterisk dangerous discoveries. The unwelcome visitor. 3 months after the crash, their peaceful existence shattered like glass. Jake was returning from his morning shift when he saw the sleek Altarian vessel landing near the mining complex. His blood turned to ice. They had found her. He burst through his door to find Zephyra standing rigid by the window, watching the alien ship. Her face had gone pale, and her hands shook as she stepped back from the viewport. They have come for me, she whispered. I knew. This day would arrive, but I hoped. Jake pulled her away from the window. Who is it? How many? One ship, but it carries the insignia of the War Council. They sent Keller Vexion. Her voice cracked with fear. He is the male they chose for. My binding. He is also one of their most ruthless hunters. The hunter arrives Keller Vexion was everything Jake had imagined an Altarian warrior would be. 8 feet tall, built like a living weapon, with cold silver eyes that missed nothing. He strode through the mining complex like he owned it, demanding answers about the crashed vessel. Jake watched from a distance as the alien questioned the colony administrator. Even from 50 yards away, the menace radiating from Keller was palpable. This was a being who had never heard the word no, and lived in a universe where his will was absolute law. The female who escaped is mine by right of binding, Keller announced to the assembled humans. His English was perfect, but harsh. She carries classified information that threatens galactic security. Return her to me, and your colony will be compensated. Harbor her, and you will face the consequences. The administrator, a weak man named Phillips, practically groveled. Of course, sir. We had no idea. If she's here, we'll find her immediately. Jake's jaw clenched. He'd always known Phillips was spineless, but watching him sell out an innocent woman for credits made his stomach turn. He slipped away before anyone could notice him, his mind racing with plans, preparing for war back at his quarters. Jake found Zephyra packing the few belongings she'd accumulated. Her movements were mechanical, defeated. Where are you going? He demanded. Away from here, away from you. I will not let my presence destroy your life. She wouldn't meet his eyes. Keller will never stop hunting. If he finds me with you, He will kill you slowly to make me watch. It is his way. Jake grabbed her hands, stilling her frantic packing. I'm not letting you go. You do not understand. He has legal claim to me under Altarian law. If I resist, he can invoke the right of conquest. He will hunt down everyone who helped me, everyone I care about. Her golden eyes filled with tears. I cannot bear to see you hurt because of me. Then we don't let him find us. Jake's voice was steady, determined. This colony has over 300 tunnels running through the mountains. I know every inch of them. We disappear into the deep shafts until we can figure out how to get you. Off-world. Zephyra stared at him in amazement. You would abandon your life here? Your work? Your safety? Everything? My life is wherever you are, Jake said simply. The rest is just stuff. Into the depths they spent the next hour gathering. Supplies, food, water, thermal clothing, and Jake's portable unit. As they prepared to leave, Zephyra turned to him with something like wonder in her expression. I do not understand you, Jake Morrison. Every instinct of your species should tell you to surrender me and save yourself. Yet you choose danger for my sake. Why? Jake checked his equipment one final time, then looked at her seriously. Because love isn't about keeping someone safe in a cage. It's about standing beside them when the world tries to tear them down. It's about choosing them every day, even when that choice costs you everything. Zephyra felt her heart break and heal at the same time. No one had ever chosen her before. If we do this, there may be no going back. Keller will not give up easily. Then, we'll have to be smarter than he is. They slipped out through the maintenance tunnels as the colony prepared for mandatory searches. Behind them, they could hear Keller's voice echoing through the corridors, promising rewards for information and threats for deception. The chase begins deep in the mining tunnels. They found an abandoned section that had been sealed off years ago due to unstable ground. Jake rigged emergency lighting while Zephyra used her superior hearing to monitor for pursuit. The rough stone walls wept with condensation, and the air was thin, but they were hidden. He will search systematically, Zephyra warned. Keller is patient when he hunts. He will examine every tunnel, every shaft, until he finds our trail. Jake was studying blueprints on his portable reader. Maybe, but he doesn't know these tunnels like I do. There are areas that aren't on any official map, spaces between the planned excavations. We can stay ahead of him. Hours passed in tense silence. Through the cung channels, they could hear the systematic search progressing. Keller had brought scanning equipment that could detect life signs, heat signatures, even trace amounts of Altarian DNA. But the deep tunnels were filled with interference from the mining equipment and natural mineral deposits as they huddled. Together in the darkness, Zephyra marveled at the human beside her. Jake should have been terrified, should have regretted his decision. Instead, he was calm, focused, planning their next move with the precision of a military strategist. You are remarkable, she whispered. Your people, they are stronger than mine, realize. Jake squeezed her hand in the darkness. We're about to find out just how strong. Above them, Keller's hunt continued, methodical and relentless. But for the first time since her escape began, Zephyra felt hope flickering in her chest. She was no longer running alone. She had found something her people said was impossible, a human worth dying for, and more importantly, worth living for. The stand quartered after 2 days of cat and mouse in the tunnels. Jake knew they were running out of options. Keller's search pattern was tightening, and the Altarian hunters seemed to be learning the tunnel system as he went. Worse, their supplies were dwindling, and Zephyra was showing signs of exhaustion. They had taken shelter in a small alcove deep in the abandoned section when Jake's worst fears came true. The steady ping of the motion detector he'd rigged went silent. Someone had found and disabled it. "He is close," Zephyra whispered, her enhanced hearing picking up sounds Jake couldn't detect. "Very close." Jake checked his improvised weapons. A plasma cutter from the mining equipment, some explosive charges he'd liberated from the blasting supplies, and his grandfather's combat knife. Not much against a trained Altarian warrior, but it would have. "To do," the confrontation call's voice echoed through the tunnel system, cold and mocking. "Little human, you have played an amusing game, but it ends now. Surrender the female, and I will grant you a quick death. Continue this foolishness, and I will make you beg for oblivion." Jake squeezed Zephyr's hand. "Stay behind me, no matter what happens." "Jake, no. He will kill you. Let me go to him. Let me end this not happening." Jake's voice was steel wrapped in velvet. "We go together or not at all." The sound of approaching footsteps echoed off the stone walls. Keller appeared around the corner like a nightmare made flesh, his silver eyes reflecting Jake's flashlight beam. He was even more intimidating up close, all predatory grace and barely contained violence. "So," Keller said, his voice carrying easily in the confined space, "this is the primitive that thinks he can claim what belongs to me." His gaze shifted to Zephyra. "Female, you have disgraced yourself enough. Come." "No," Zephyra said, standing. Tall beside Jake. "I am not your property, Keller Vexion." "I will never be your property." Keller's expression darkened. "You were bred for me, gene matched to produce the strongest offspring. You will fulfill your purpose, willing or not." "Unlikely." Courage Jake stepped forward, placing himself between the towering Altarian and Zephyra. To anyone watching, it would have looked comical, human barely 6 feet tall, facing down a warrior who could snap him like a twig. But there was something in Jake's stance, something in his eyes, that gave Keller pause. "She said no," Jake said quietly. "That's the end of the discussion." Keller laughed, a sound like grinding metal. "You amuse me, little human. Do you know what I am? I have conquered worlds. I have broken armies. And you, a dirt scratcher from a mining colony, think. To challenge me? I think everyone deserves the right to choose their own life," Jake replied, "even if that choice pisses off overgrown bullies with god complexes." The insult hit home. Keller's face twisted with rage, and he lunged forward with inhuman speed. But Jake was ready. He triggered the plasma cutter, sending a beam of superheated energy across the tunnel. Keller dodged, but the beam scorched his armor, forcing him back. The battle what followed was less a fight than a desperate survival dance. Keller was stronger, faster, and better trained, but Jake had advantages of his own. He knew these tunnels, knew every loose rock and unstable support beam. When Keller charged, Jake led him into areas where the ceiling was lower, where the hunter's height became a disadvantage. The plasma cutter kept Keller at bay, but Jake knew it wouldn't last long. The weapon was designed for cutting ore, not combat. Already it was overheating, its beam growing weaker with each use. Zephyra watched in amazement as Jake fought with a combination of cunning and pure, stubborn courage. This was what humans could be when pushed to their limits, not the strongest or the fastest, but the most unpredictable, the most unwilling to give up. "You cannot win, human," Keller snarled, circling like a predator. "I am superior in every way." "Maybe," Jake gasped, sweat streaming down his face. "But I've got something you don't." "And what is that?" Jake glanced at Zephyra, and she saw something in his eyes that made her heart stop. Love, pure, unconditional, willing to die for you love. Something worth fighting for. The turning point Jake triggered the explosive charges he'd placed throughout. The tunnel section. The plan was desperate, potentially suicidal, but it was their only chance. The explosions brought down sections of the ceiling, filling the air with dust and debris. In the chaos, Jake grabbed Zephyra and pulled her toward the exit. But Keller was too fast. The Altarian warrior burst through the settling dust like an avenging angel. His armor cracked, but his determination unbroken. His massive hand closed around Jake's throat, lifting him off the ground. "Enough games," Keller growled. "Watch your precious human die, female. Then you will come with me willingly, or I will drag his corpse behind my ship all the way to Alterus." That's when Zephyra made her choice. For the first time in her life, she embraced the strength her people had called a defect. She grabbed a piece of fallen support beam solid, titanium steel, and brought it down on Keller's head with all her considerable might. The blow staggered the warrior, causing him to drop Jake. Zephyra stepped between them, no longer the frightened refugee, but a protector defending what she loved. "If you want him," she said, her voice carrying new authority, "you go through me first." Keller stared at her in shock. In all his years of hunting, he had never seen defiance like this. The female was supposed to be weak, compliant, grateful for his attention. This creature before him was something else entirely. "You would choose this weak human over the strength I offer?" he demanded. Zephyra helped Jake to his feet, never taking her eyes off Keller. "This human has shown me more strength in 3 months than your entire civilization has in centuries. Real strength isn't about conquest, Keller. It's about choice. It's about love. And I choose him." For the first time in his life, Keller Vexion found himself facing something he didn't understand. A female who preferred love to power, choice to security, freedom to genetic destiny. It shook him to his core. The standoff continued, but something had changed. Zephyra was no longer running. She was standing her ground, and beside her, Jake Morrison, battered but unbroken, stood ready to face whatever came next. New beginnings, the unexpected ally. The standoff in the collapsed tunnel stretched for long, tense minutes. Keller, despite his confusion at Zephyra's defiance, was preparing for another attack when the sound of approaching voices echoed through the passages. But these weren't human voices, they were Altarian, speaking in the rapid military dialect that Zephyra recognized from her youth. "Keller Vexion," came a commanding female voice. "You will stand down immediately." A figure emerged from the shadows, and Jake's eyes widened. If Keller was intimidating, this newcomer was magnificent. Tall even by Altarian standards, with armor that marked her as high nobility, she carried herself with the authority of someone accustomed to absolute obedience. "Commander Thisa Vel Karan," Zephyra breathed, recognition and hope warring in her voice. "My mentor." Keller's expression shifted from confidence to uncertainty. "Commander, this female is my bonded by genetic right. I am within my authority to retrieve her." Thisa's silver eyes fixed on him with barely contained contempt. "Your authority ends where the law begins, Hunter. And the law is very clear about refugees who claim sanctuary under the protection codes." The truth revealed, as it turned out, Zephyra's research had reached more people than she'd realized. A growing movement within Altarian society was questioning the rigid genetic castes and arranged bondings. Thisa had been investigating the same corruption that Zephyra had uncovered, building a case that would shake the foundations of their civilization. "Your data, combined with what we've gathered, proves systematic manipulation of genetic records," Thisa explained as they sat in Jake's quarters hours later. Keller had been confined to his ship under guard, his authority revoked pending investigation. The Council has been falsifying compatibility ratings to maintain their power structure. Jake listened to the conversation with growing amazement. These two remarkable women were planning nothing less than a revolution, a complete restructuring of an entire civilization's worldview. "But what does this mean for us?" he finally asked, taking Zephyra's hand. Thisa smiled, an expression that transformed her stern features. It means, human Jake Morrison, that you have done something unprecedented. You have shown one of our people what true bonding looks like. Your relationship with Zephyra is being studied by our reformist faction as proof that love, not genetic compatibility, creates the strongest partnerships. A choice to make over the next few days as Altarian legal proceedings unfolded. Jake and Zephyra faced a decision that would determine their future. Thesa offered them several paths. Zephyra could return to Altaris as a hero of the reform movement. Jake could be granted citizenship there, or they could go anywhere in the galaxy they chose. What do you want? Jake asked as they walked through the mining complex one last time. Zephyra considered carefully. I want to help my people find a better way, but I also want to build a life with you. These desires do not have to be separate paths. Jake squeezed her hand. So we do both. We help change things together. The wedding 3 months later, Kepler 442b hosted its first interspecies wedding. The ceremony blended human and reformed Altarian traditions, witnessed by beings from a dozen worlds. Thesa performed the bonding ritual, while Jake's sister, who had traveled from Earth, handled the human vows. You know, Jake said as they exchanged rings, when I came to this rock, I thought my life was over. Turns out it was just beginning. Zephyra, resplendent in flowing robes that accommodated her height and honored both their cultures, smiled with tears in her golden eyes. I was told I was unbondable, unlovable, a genetic mistake. You showed me that the only mistake was believing. Them. New Horizons a year later, their ship a wedding gift from the Altarian reformist government dropped out of hyperspace near the Andromeda Gateway. They had spent months traveling between worlds, documenting other species' bonding customs, gathering evidence that love transcended genetic programming. Their research was changing minds across the galaxy. The rigid caste systems that had seemed eternal were cracking, replaced by societies that valued choice and individual happiness over genetic determinism. Look at that, Zephyra said, pointing to the massive space station ahead of them. Representatives from 50 species had gathered for the first Galactic Council on Individual Rights. Jake wrapped his arms around his wife, marveling at how perfectly she fit against him despite their size difference. Ready to change the universe? With you, I am ready for anything. The legacy years passed. Their work took them to the far reaches of known space, where they helped establish new colonies based on principles of choice and equality. They raised 2 children, a daughter with Jake's stubborn streak and Sephora's intelligence, and a son with his mother's height and his father's gentle heart. The mining colony where they'd met became a pilgrimage site for interspecies couples, a symbol of love conquering seemingly impossible odds. A monument stood where Sephora's pod had crashed, inscribed with words that had become famous across the galaxy. Love knows no boundaries, recognizes no castes, and bows to no authority but the heart. On their 10th anniversary, they returned to that spot. Zephyra, now confident and radiant in ways she'd never imagined possible, stood hand in hand with the human who had taught her that she was worthy of love. Any regrets? Jake asked, gray, threading through his hair, but his eyes still bright with mischief. Zephyra laughed, the sound still like silver bells to his ears. Only one. I regret that it took a crash landing to find you. I should have come looking sooner. Jake pulled her down for a kiss, their children playing nearby, the binary sunset painting the sky in shades of gold and purple. Around them, the galaxy continued to change, one heart at a time, because 2 unlikely souls had proven that love really could conquer all. In the end, that's what humans did best. They loved fiercely, chose bravely, and refused to accept that any barrier was truly insurmountable. And sometimes, just sometimes, that was enough to change everything.